our full focus was capturing the data, but we've also really started to shift to take the data and create the deliverables for people, because more and more people are learning to capture, and it's a slower adoption as to, well, now what?
So here's an example of the amount of data that we actually capture. This is a floor plan view of a rail station, and this is just one tier of that data.
Terabytes or almost petabytes of data essentially has gone dark, because this was the only way they had organized their data.
But it's always been the post-processing part. So you got the data, now what are you going to do with it? To this day, meshing has still been an issue.
We're all not in the business of creating beautiful 3D models that we can use as marketing material. We're in the business of providing useful information to the project engineers and the project owners that allows us to reduce risk, that allows us to understand the project better, and that allows us to advance design and construction timelines in the industry.
There is a lot of drone data, there is a lot of 360 photo data, there's site cameras, there's laser scan data. It's just the Wild West. It's just a bunch of data being collected in different silos that doesn't necessarily come together. If you want to deliver this to the owner at the end of the day, it's been rotated and put on this coordinate system. That way later you could get access to all this information where you want it.
The software we use and the actual deliverable we create, it's all the same discussion. It's what is the client, what's their use case, what's the level of detail they need. All right, guys, let's welcome our panelists for the Data and Deliverables panel. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Ooh, a little bit of feedback. Welcome. All right, we're going to start with doing some introductions. We've got quite a diverse panel up here, and I'm excited to dig into this conversation. Again, throughout the course of the conference, we've talked about the fact there's so many technologies, and this panel I think is important because scanners, drones, photogrammetry, we're creating so much data. And one of the big conversations is, what do we do with that data? How do we store it? How do we share it? There's a lot of challenges we hit. So having a conversation with panelists, I think, is one way to hear how we're approaching issues we've gone through. And I'm actually going to hand over and have Greg Hale here host this panel for us. So you guys can start with some introductions.
All right, so a quick introduction for myself. So Greg Hale, owner of Hale Technology and Practice. Been at the business for about 9 years, doing a lot of VDC construction coordination, as well as a lot of scan-to-BIM reality capture, and certainly learned a lot of lessons over those time in data and deliverables.
Luke Bingham, I'm with DataSite. I've been in surveying and civil engineering for 35 plus years. Started scanning with a Cyrix scanner. If anybody remember what a Cyrix is? Anybody? All the way through the RTC. I've worked with many scanners, terrestrial, mobile, and aerial. Today we're focusing on, our company is focusing on data deliverables, and specifically with regards to analyzing point cloud data to create DTMs, clean DTMs.
My name is Adam Krasnowski, and one of the founders of Airworks Solutions, and we develop algorithms that help us manage data sets and extract features from those data sets. So we work with clients from mobile terrestrial scan data, UAV, and manned aircraft, and we create the CAD deliverables using the power of math and algorithms.
Ryan Thomas, I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates out of Denver, Colorado. I've been in the reality capture space for 7 going on 8 years. Been in the hardware solutions, SaaS realm, and now as a client, kind of getting both sides of the realm. So very excited to be here.
My name is Adam Gerleski. I work for Pioneer Construction out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've been scanning for probably about the last 6-7 years. We also own 5 different scanners, anything from a Matterport up to TX8. from Tremble. And yeah.
Matt Daly, co-founder and CEO at Struction Site, now part of Drone Deploy. In a past life, also part of Faro, and spent a lot of time with data and deliverables over on the Faro team, and even as a part of Rhythm. Some of you guys may have heard of that piece of software. So yeah, everything from laser scanning deliverables to now a little bit more photo-based in our world. But yeah.
Hi, my name is Linda Garrity. I'm the founder of Measure Spaces. We are a reality capture solutions provider. I got into construction technology back when Xerox rolled out the 2510. I don't know if any of you guys remember that. Thank you. But so it just really drove home for me how technology can improve, processes, and just ignited a passion in me that I've pursued for the last 25 years.
Hi, I'm Logan McGinnis. I am a VDC manager with the Whites Company. We are a general contractor based in Des Moines with offices across the country. I head our laser scanning department, so that includes acquiring new scanners, kind of seeing how we can use scanning technology across the company, and defining the deliverables that we provide to help our projects move forward.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. You can see we have a pretty wide variety of panelists, so we're going to have a lot of opinions here. I thought to kind of shake things up a little bit. We all come to these presentations and we see a lot of success stories, people showing off their best stuff. And I thought we'd change it up a little bit with regards to data and deliverables and talk about some of our biggest failures. Everybody's been there. Some of these are fun stories and some of them are just tragic. So see if anybody can jump in here and think about one of those times you had one of those enormous lessons learned and basically how you solve that and maybe a standard or a process that you've built from that lesson.
I'll start, yeah. Yeah, I'll start. So this actually incorporates Nexus 3D and Matt Bird. So many bad scars here. I'm not gonna lie to you, it hurts even talking this. 1.6 million square feet, basically abandoned warehouse. Client wanted all of it scanned and delivered in one file. So let's just talk there. Basically non-existent, unrealistic expectations. So there was education that needed to come on my front to our end client, and then let alone just the scanning of the building itself. That tackling of that was unbelievably hard. Trying to process all that data off of one laptop using Faro's Scene software. My gosh, it was brutal. And the biggest issue that we ran into was trying to take walls and the same type of building over and over and over again, as it was 7 different rooms that were 350,000 square feet per room, and blend them all together. And Matt Bird was up sleeping in his office, literally sleeping in his office, trying to help us basically process and register all of this data. We were a few weeks late, and by a few I mean several, and ultimately the long story short of this is you go through that process and you just don't know what you're getting yourself into. And as you're handing the data over to the client, you're trying your best to educate them as best as you possibly can, but you're also going through the throes of processing and the situations of Scene or any processing software that is. So ultimately, we learned that giving them realistic expectations at the very forefront of it, and that's in anything, right? But trying to really educate them on the very forefront is huge. Handing the data over and breaking everything apart into small chunks is the best way to go about that. Oh God, and using multiple different type of processing softwares is also a good idea as well. So leaning into our space, leaning into our industry leaders, we collectively need to all do that. And that was at least the biggest thing that I inherited coming out of that. We're all smart people up here. Everybody in this room, we all need to tap into each other from time to time. That was terrible, though. I'm not gonna lie to you. That project sucked.
That hurt from here.
So I also have a story that also involves Matt too, so I don't know if this is going to be kind of like a trend or not, but we had a very large nunnery. I don't know if you guys know what a nunnery is. It's a place where all the sisters, all the nuns live. It's this huge building. It was 5 floors. It was my first real large-scale project. We broke it up into floors, and we had to somehow combine everything back together. I didn't use control at all. Hindsight, I should have used control. From now on, that's what we're doing on our large projects, is using control and setting control inside the buildings, because it was a mess. Not so much on my part. I think it was more a mess on Matt's part, because he had to register all that stuff together. So, but just learning from that is just using control and taking the time to set it up right the first time. And it'll just make it go so much faster and so much easier in the end.
My lesson learned is scope creep. So we scoped, we priced, we went on site, and I met the PM there, and it was a series of warehouses as well, and brought a whole new definition to deferred maintenance on these buildings. And so we're out there, and I'm wrapping up the first day, and he's like, so when are we gonna do the roof? And I went, I don't have the roof in scope. Like, I know we talked about the roof, but I don't have the roof. And he's like, well, I promised the client the roof. And I'm there, and like, it's my first time, with them, and I've known these guys for like decades, and I don't want to, let them down. So I'm like, oh, and it's July in South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach. So it's 82 degrees at, 5 a.m. So I'm like, all right, let's just meet at 6 a.m. So he goes out, and I meet him there, and like the ladder goes up, and I put the backpack on him, and I'm carrying the tripod, and we're getting up on this roof, and there are all these skylights that are around, and he's like, yeah, just stay 6 inches off the center line, you'll be fine. And it's flexing like under my feet, and I'm thinking to myself, like where does, where do you stop, right? Anyway, bottom line is I did the roof, and they were happy, and I've worked with them again, but you just got to learn to say, no, and I can't do it, or we'll call, a drone pilot. But it's just hard to say that face-to-face to your client. So anyway, no more scope creep.
I've got one. So definitely one lesson learned is the importance of the coordination with the field team on project sites. So first project I was on, I was a project engineer, kind of got tasked with this crazy laser scanning scope, which Linda and her previous company actually helped us out with. We basically had to do an analysis of the structural steel versus the design model and measure the delta between the two to fit these super complex prefabbed ACM panels on the building. Did not realize the accuracy of the control that we needed. Not only that we needed to use control, which we initially didn't, but the level of accuracy we needed with that. So the placement of control, we put these rotating targets on top of concrete bollards that were spray painted neon orange, thinking that the field crew would respect them. These were over 90 degrees by the time the project was done, so my control is just gone on site. I had to call the surveyor back every couple days. So yeah, importance of communication with all the superintendents and foremen on the job, as well as the timeliness of capturing scans. So we had steel that was moving nearly 2 inches a day in the South Florida heat, and I'm looking at this data, and I'm just like, I'm losing my mind. Like, the building can't be moving that much, and then we shot some points, and lo and behold, it was flexing about 2 inches a day. So the importance of either capturing all the data kind of in one fell swoop, or shooting at the same time every day if you need to do it across a number of days. Some takeaways we had from that.
I think this is going to be a theme, survey control. One of my favorite stories to tell about the founding story of at least Rhythm and also even instruction side is talking about meeting my co-founder Philip, and as when he was a VDC engineer at McCarthy, and I think one of my favorite parts of that story is how do we get started? What inspired him to start this company? And it was like bought a laser scanner, and I'm like, here you go, man. Here's a piece of software that totally was not designed to do what you need to do. And of course, he calls me late at night, and he's like, dude, your software sucks. And of course, like really, when you peel back the layers of that, it's like, okay, finally, the next morning we're looking at the data, and very similar survey control. When you're very new to it, you don't really know what to do. Someone tells you you need to put 3 targets out, and you need to tie into 3 targets. And so I'm looking at his data, and I'm sorry, Philip, I'm totally throwing you under the bus here, buddy. There's like 3 targets right next to each other in a straight line on the wall to control the entire floor. And I was just like, I don't think this is the software, my friend. This is a you problem. Triangles need to be big. So no, like I think it was a really important lesson learned about the importance of survey control. I know that's been a theme here, and I think even going forward, survey will be even more important. I think with the amount of data that's coming at us these days from different sources. So yeah, the big lesson learned there was like, yes, it is very important. I do think the importance will increase in the future, but we're here at RCN, and like Matt, you're trying to train people about how to do this stuff. Like, don't put 3 targets on a wall in a straight line, and try to tie to that as control for the whole building. That's a good lesson learned for us.
Kind of sounds like an Amelia Bedelia moment right there. Yeah. One of my stories would be around data standards, so input data standards. The way that we train algorithms to be able to extract features is actually feeding it a lot of data beforehand. And that process takes a lot of time. There's a lot of involvement in creating and labeling existing data to create a prediction of what you want it to look like. And we entered into a new market. It was a fiber broadband. So there are very traditional kind of right-of-way surveys kind of supporting the permitting process, so base maps for that. And a client wanted to use a mobile scanner for it. And we just expected that the client knew how to collect data properly. And so we took on a very large, I think the first one was about 400 miles worth of this. And we ran it through our algorithm, and we virtually had nothing that was usable, right? So everything had to be hand drafted from that point. And that was a huge learning lesson of just alignment and communication for us on input data standards. There's just a certain quality that we're all expecting, right, from after these collection processes, and it certainly affected the way that our predictions were made. So, yeah, it's always communication, it's alignment, and trying to think of everything before kind of digging into a project.
Everything I've heard so far comes down to communication. It's funny because you mentioned earlier that we were going to be talking about some of our failures, and everything I can come up with always comes down to communication. From the scope that you get from the client to the communication between the surveyors and the scanners and the engineers. I'm thinking back to one where we got a scope that required to convert all the pipes that we were scanning into civil 3D, AutoCAD solid models, which if you worked with AutoCAD, straight up AutoCAD making solid models, it's not built for that, but you could do it, it's just not built for that. But that's what the spec called for. And this is back when I was doing the scanning and the modeling, trying to tell the boss, I know that's what it says, but there's better things that we could be giving them, that this was probably not what they really wanted, and the boss says, this is the scope they gave us, this is what we're delivering. So, 3 weeks later into trying to model these pipes in civil and in AutoCAD, he's wondering why this hasn't been delivered yet. And well, let me go back to that conversation we had 2 weeks ago where we needed to talk to the client about the scope. So he finally went back and talked to the client about the scope after we'd been modeling for 2 weeks and found out, oh, that's not what we want. That's an old scope that we just cookie cuttered and sent to you guys. And so the scope wasn't really even relevant, but that was the communication breakdown between the client and us. They gave us a scope that had been written 10 years earlier, and they were still using it over and over and over for every new project. And so communication. I mean, if you think there's something wrong with the scope, ask the client. Tell them that this is not a reasonable expectation. Always communication.
Those are some awesome stories, and it sounds like everybody has some control problems. And I don't want to bolster the surveyors in the room too much, but it is definitely an aspect of large projects that is an absolute must in these, especially for the laser scanning group. And then communication, that is fantastic. It does come down to that. You know, I can't see hands in the room, but I'm sure every one of you has looked at a outdated spec on a project and said, that's not really what they want. I'm sure of it. And then the last aspect is, if nothing else out of all of this, when you go into a project, have a plan B. Because plan A very often does not work. So having a safety net and thinking about what plan B is a very good approach. So I was going to switch it up again just a little bit. That was, hopefully at least a little humorous, little break in the action. But we've had a lot of talk in the past couple of years about the pandemic and COVID and how things have changed. And I was curious from the panel, when it comes to data and deliverables, how that's changed the game, but even more so, how we think it's going to change the game in the next few years. We've had a kind of a major shift in hybrid workforce. We've had a bit of a shift of, servers in offices. So as far as delivering your project or lots of data to your clients, how has that kind of shifted in the past couple of years, and where do you think we should place our money in the coming years?
I guess I'll go first on that one. Yeah, the last 2 years have been really stressful, trying to figure out how to get data, right, to architects, engineers, people like Matthew, consultants, like how do you get that? Luckily in Grand Rapids, we have some really good architects. I don't know how many houses I've been to in the past 2 years where I've got a thumb drive or I've got a flash drive and I drop it off to them. I set it on their front porch. I text it to them. I see them. I wave. I get in my car. They leave. They text me when they're done. I come back, pick it up, and it's still on their front porch. I've done that several times over the past several years. But really, it's going to be cloud storage. We're going to be able to put it up into something that's that where all the data goes, right? Whether it's something like Cupix or some other software, whether it's open space, drone deploy / instruction site. So just something like that we're able to upload all this data to and be able to have other people pull it down from, right? But then I know we've kind of talked about it back there too, is the data security side of things, right? We kind of heard Kelly talk about it this morning is, cybersecurity. To be honest with you, that scares the crap out of me. I don't know why, but it just does. I've got a friend, Nick Espinoza. He's a white hat hacker. I listened to a couple of his presentations, and he's like, I can get into your computer within 5 seconds. I'm like, there's no way. We have all this stuff set up. And he's broken through every time, and I can't figure out how he's doing it. I guess that's why I'm a construction technologist and not a cyber hacker, right? But it's doing all that, and what stages do you do it in? Right now, Pioneer, I'm trying to get us to the highest standard, the SOC 2, because to me, hackers aren't going after large projects like the Dallas-Fort Worth project. Like they're going after somebody like Matt's company or Pioneer or any one of your guys' company because they're trying to find the wormhole, right? And that's how they find it and that's how they get in. It's not them directing right towards the end user. It's always these little wormholes all over. So
I think one of the biggest changes during this pandemic is really the people, right? We've all experienced the challenges around people wanting to. They got used to working from home. They want to stay working from home, or they went on unemployment and they want to stay on unemployment. So, for us as a company, as an impact, right, we see, of course, the massive amounts of data that keep being collected, and then we always hear about labor shortages, right? And so those two things are contradicting, right? And so for us as a company, we build a technology that speaks directly to that, right? We help manage large amounts of data. And so when your teams are, let's say, where your companies are growing and it's hard to find people to hire, it's a good fit. But I think the pandemic really exposed that. And it's at a time where sensors are really progressing in a way that they're getting into a lot more people's hands, and the creation of data is happening faster than ever expected, and it just happens to be through this last couple of years. So.
The FedEx prayer. That's all I'm going to say. Go to FedEx. You've got your data. You've got your equipment. And you give it to them, and you're like, please, just get from point A to point B. I'm begging you. What do I have to do? But seriously, from at least on our end, the pandemic really changed Kimley Horn in and of itself, and for everybody, yes. But our field engineers were not able to go to those sites to do those site walks. So reality capture really came into play really heavily for us. And giving that data back to our clients, my IT department, if my IT department's watching this, God, I owe you guys several beers. But seriously, they hated me for a long time because we were pushing the limits of all of our technology. We were crashing servers. It was constant. And we still do it. And there's no true solution, at least on my end, that we've been able to find besides just cold storaging everything and then tapping it back into it when you need to. But there's some other software platforms that we're looking into, Ignite being one of them, that are going to really help that cause. But again, I think on all of us, it goes back to the cloud. That's got to be the long-term solution for it. But what companies are going to step up and really help continue to push that cause, that's what I'm intrigued in.
I think that ties in a bit with kind of identifying the end user and what they need the data for. So we can upload to these cloud storage solutions. We can upload to platforms online where we can grant people access and they can fly through the point cloud in 3D and take measurements. But sometimes you're shipping it to a design team that needs an RCP to create a Revit model from or needs a specific format. So just kind of ties in with that importance of defining the capabilities of your end user and what exactly they need it for.
I just want to make one more comment on the cloud storage side of things, right? Obviously, we're completely stacked for not only our front end, but our back end, our heavy processing in the GPUs through Amazon Web Services. And even the cloud servers are starting to build better security measures around that. So AWS has GovCloud. So if you're working in those environments, you can stack up these types of security according to your client's needs. And so the cloud is obviously adopting and adjusting to the needs that are evolving here too. So it does help, and SOC 2 is a tough one. So, yeah.
Yes, what we're doing in our business right now is actually compression. So we're taking large amounts of data. People will send us, multi-gigabyte, 20, 30 gigabyte files of point cloud data, and we reduce it into a smaller format that helps define their terrain. So if they just need the terrain model, they can jettison the point cloud if that was their only intent for that point cloud. If they're the only thing they needed for this project, which is often the case, at least with our clients, they scan an area so that they can define the terrain. Do they still need the point cloud once they have the terrain model? So it comes down to also picking and choosing what actually needs to be stored and kept, because we jettison that data as soon as we get done processing it and return them a file that's usually small enough to fit in an email. So long-term storage is not a problem for us because, and we produce massive amounts of intermediate data. We get their data, we build files from that, and it grows and grows and grows. The end product is a pebble under the bottom of this heap of data. And that's what our end product is that nugget of data that represents this entire process. So compression, I think, is going to become more important in the future as well, because even though data seems to be endless and boundless and growing all the time, there's got to be a limit at some point, because we're producing data so much faster, so much more all the time. There's going to be a limit at some point. So compression might also be another solution.
I want to just expand on that just a little bit back on topic for, a little bit to the pandemic. Luke and I were having a conversation a little bit earlier about how this has kind of affected our workflow and the interactions that we have with everybody. And one of the things I'm taking away from that with meeting with clients, obviously we've had a whole heck of a lot of Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and Google meetings and everything else, and working with these data deliverables and dropping off hard drives on porches, et cetera. I'm going to attempt to say that this post-pandemic, but I'm going to say take those partners out for a beer or a coffee or something like that and build the relationships again, because that's going to help solve some of these problems with, instead of dropping off hard drives on porches or other situations like that, there are some amazing things from the people portion as opposed to the data and deliverables. And I do want to, I'll throw a plug in just because you're talking about compression and data storage. For someone like Cintu, where they're compressing the data, putting up online, I want to kind of turn over to long-term storage as well, what you guys plan on doing with that 60 terabytes of data that you want to have either backed up on 10 servers around the country or in hard drives on a drawer. But do you guys have a strategic plan for that long-term storage of all that wonderful data that nobody wants to let go?
I let it go. 30 days after your project is delivered. If you want the data, you can have the data, you can take it. But I let it go. I'm not in the long-term storage business. If it's something that's going to have multiple phases, that's a different conversation. But typically, 30 days after your deliverable, you can take your data or I can dispose of it.
So I am a data hoarder. I will be the first one to admit that. I save everything no matter what. Currently, just to give you guys an example, we've done 60 projects this year, and we're over 3 terabytes of data. I freaked our IT department out at the beginning of the year, and we bought 64 terabytes right off the bat because I told them, I was like, it's not going to get any better, and I can't delete anything. I've tried, and then I just go back on my trash can and pull it back out because I never know when I'm going to need it, whether it's doing a presentation or I have a customer call me back up and say, hey, remember that stuff that I scanned for you? That's another thing I don't do either, is I don't turn over the point clouds to the architects. Sorry if there's any architects in the room, but they don't know how to use the data. They look at it and they're like, oh, there's a bunch of dots. What am I supposed to do with it? Well, you put it in there and you draw over the top of it, and we kind of walk through that whole phase. And then seems like every time something gets messed up, and it always comes back to us. So one of our processes is, well, we'll go out and scan it. We'll give you a Revit file. We'll house the data for you. I don't like to give that data out unless our owners ask for it, because they don't know what to do with it, right? They don't know what to do with the point cloud. It looks pretty, but they don't have Revit. They don't have RCP recap files. Like, they can't open it anyway, so why spend the time and send it to them? So I learned that over the pandemic too, going back and forth with flash drives. It's just like, you know what, heck with it, just let me draw it up. You can pay me for it. I'll turn it over to you and it'll be all done and it'll be in a nice little package for you.
So you are the data hoarder, and then what do you do with all of that data?
I am.
You hang on to it? Like I said, is it in a drawer in the office, or?
No, it's on our server. It's also backed up on other servers as well. So, if you looked on my desktop on my computer, I have files that I don't even know what they are, but I can't delete them. I've tried to go in there and I started deleting some. I'm like, oh, I don't need this one. But yeah, I hold on to everything. News articles, because I never know when I have to go back and refer to something. And educate owners, right, and architects, like, hey, what is a point cloud? What am I supposed to do with it? I've got articles from 6 years ago that I share with different owners and such. So,
in our terms and conditions, we actually retain rights to use our clients' data sets to train the algorithm. So after client deliverable, we convert that to training data. Once we go through that training process, we get back, or we get rid of it on the back end, and then it's up to the client, right? Through the platform, clients can keep projects if they want there live, or they can delete them. So, but as far as data goes, we use it for training, and then we we just offload it.
I think we're in a similar boat over here where it's like we have a couple different options. Keep it online for 10 years is basically usually the sort of amount of time that a builder is going to want it kept online. But then we produce an offline deliverable that does still potentially end up in a hoarder's data closet. I don't know. But it does go offline and it can live there as well. But I think the point you made about like abstracting away the deliverable you were actually getting, I know can be a lot like harder as a person who has laser scan data and there's so much I can do with this. But like really, there are going to be situations where you need to do that and you should just hold on to it because that's your insurance policy. But if it isn't that data set, if it's not the insurance policy, you should look to just actually extract the deliverables you were looking for. It's a much smaller file. Hold on to those and save those. And like sometimes you just got to throw the data away, man. I don't know. Sometimes you got to let it go.
Because you've already created the deliverable, right? Like you have the raw point cloud data. It's been registered. It's been cleaned. It's been converted into either unified RCP, RCS, E57, whatever you need. You have created the next iteration of all that data, right? So that's going to be the usable downstream. So if the architect or the owner, whoever hires me, that is the usable data. Unless I have to go back in and open up the raw data and put in, a new piping line or something, a structural change or something from that where I literally have to go back into the raw data set, I don't need it. And I don't want to absorb the cost or the liability of it. So I just moved out of the house I've been in for 20 years. I get it. I didn't throw anything away, right? But at the end of the day, do you really need it? And how often do you go back to it? And do you need it in that first iteration or the deliverable iteration, right? Which we've moved on to the design platform, which we've then moved in. We can move it downstream.
So we do have project managers that they look at this data that we've given them. They're like, hey, this is really awesome. Can you go do this? That's where I need the raw data. And that's happened to me several times where I'm like, oh shoot, like, okay, do I still have that raw data? Right. I can go back in. Again, I could create more.
Right, so maybe you have a warehouse data set and you have an architectural data set, and you have an MEP data set, and then maybe you just keep that and use that as your sales tool.
I'll just add onto that. Again, we were talking about this a little earlier. So our dirty little secret is Google Workspace, that if you work it a little bit, you can basically get unlimited storage still until we break the system. At some point it might happen. But a little bit about that conversation, our aspect of retaining that data is that the client retention, that we feel like we're a little bit better at storing and retrieving data than they are, so that when that question comes up for that next project, which we all hope and anticipate that they come back, that it's ready and it's basically just a quick download and we're ready to fly again. So we are also a data hoarder in that respect, but when it really doesn't cost you anything, I think it's a different story than if you're paying for cold storage.
Well, that and data's cheap, I think. I mean, for our 64-byte terabyte server that we bought, it was $5,000.
So I'm on an AWS platform and I'm spending $1,000 a month, so I don't want your data.
You might want to look at different buckets, right?
I'm totally looking at different buckets, but that's a different conversation. But yes, absolutely.
Let's see, a little bit of different. We've been talking a lot about data, and obviously when we're dealing with this industry, we're talking about huge files, et cetera, but let's talk about the flip side of that, the deliverables. So technology conference like this, we see a lot of things kind of moving around, and there's always an argument, had it a lot lately, around what is the proper deliverable and what is the best format. So dealing with point clouds, they're very large, they're very cumbersome. Nobody's had a true solution all the way around. But we start talking about clientele that we all work for in some kind of service providing. They want line work. They want 3D models. They want specific file formats. Maybe sometimes they want raw point clouds. Maybe they want meshes now. Do you guys see any transformation with the industry, with the things that are going, or are we still stuck with we want that two-dimensional CAD file just like we did 20 years ago?
At the end of the day, I deliver what my client can use. So I loved the analysis yesterday with the stub ups before the pour, and she just, they scan, they do a data slice, 4 inches off deck, they printed in a PDF, like right off the screen, gets it out to, the guys in the field, and they're correcting on the fly. That's the deliverable that works for them. My fundamental goal is however you can ingest and utilize information, that's the format I want to give it to you in. So if we're, doing, it's Crazy Klein, he's doing these tree houses, right? So we're doing like these meshes around these tree bases. So, but he needs that, he needs that in a mesh. He also needs the contours and, in a Civil 3D, deliverable. So, one deliverable is an OBJ because that's going off to his iteration design team. The other one's in, a format for a civil team to ingest. PDF thing is beautiful. I work with a national architecture firm. They do a ton of TI work. I strip out all the information that I collect in 3D, and I give them a 2D, DWG, because that's what they work from. So at the end of the day, I think our responsibility as professionals and service providers is to make the data digestible, because just because we know everything about it or what to use or how, they don't care. So if we're going to make it relevant to them, let's make it relevant to them.
File formats, I think it's important to try, as our company goes, we try to go back to more of an open source format, right? Because a lot of softwares that our clients are delivering data to us might be proprietary formats, and it's really hard to work around the way that our workflows go, right? To be able to handle all of those proprietary file types. So working in a open source format makes life much easier. And I think one of the more important or relevant file types that we have already started to adopt is something called cloud optimized geotiffs. So it uses a type of compression, lossless compression, and then also as you're viewing geotiffs in a cloud environment, you're calling for just the tiles that you're viewing in your window. So it moves faster, it's less toll on the systems, and so I guess open source and these types of lossless compressions are going to be very important for the future.
I think coming from a general contractor standpoint, I think that in terms of deliverables, we have some opportunity in pushing forward past traditional PDFs or printed drawings, in that a lot of our project teams don't necessarily know what they want. Right, we'll get some buy-in from superintendents who are like, oh wow, you can scan this, go scan the whole thing. It's like, but what's the end goal? What are you trying to do? Or they'll come to us with, hey, we have this one area of a project where we're concerned about, we think something might be off here. So in kind of identifying what they're looking at as the end goal, we can redefine those deliverables from being traditional 2D drawings to like, hey, let me get you this ASTM 1155 floor flatness analysis I did in Rhythm, or let me export this small point or this small mesh from a point cloud so that we can actually like model off of that. So I do believe that opportunity exists there, and that since this is such a fast-growing industry, and especially like new kind of in our construction realm, we kind of can drive the progress forward in terms of deliverables there.
I look at the meshing engines that have come out on just the updates in the last year or two. We look at preview upstairs, and it's come a long way, and it's needed to. But at least in my world, meshes have made game-changing movements. And we do a lot of drone work as well, so our handoffs to them via side scan is relatively easy. But one thing that I'm really excited to see is that future push for meshes, and where do we go? I mean, if you're able to look at a bolt and actually understand and do like cross cuts of a bolt, it's mind blowing. So I continue to see that make major waves within my space.
Yeah, I think meshes is going to be the next big thing. Like you said, just from the preview, 3D. I mean, I was about ready to buy it right there yesterday. Like, I've got a project that I've got to draw. I got a model at 800-ton press in a tool and die shop. We have to take it from one facility and move it to another facility. I have to scan both facilities. Well, instead of having to draw the 800 press, draw up the new facility, I can just give this to the owner, teach him how to use it, and he can go do his own thing, and he can make the adjustments. And then hopefully, I don't know if I can do this yet, but we can export that as a floor plan. And we do a lot of rendering stuff as well. We use Unreal Engine and, with Autodesk creating that partnership and knowing that meshing, it's going to get bigger and bigger, and it's just going to grow.
Does it take over? We talked about it earlier. Does it take over CAD? Does it take over the Revit model eventually? Something's going to get extinguished from it as the meshes get better.
I hope it's CAD. To me, CAD is useless because we don't live in a flat world, right? And my buddy Jay's here with me too, and he'll tell you the same thing. And that's who I got that from, is that we live in a real world, and everything is not flat. I mean, you can look at the stage, you can look at the floor. It's not flat, right? And that's how you draw in AutoCAD.
My Civil 3D guys are having a hernia right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, CAD stopped being 2D a long time ago. And I think that the deliverables comes down to understanding the pain points that your client has. If you've worked as an engineer, as a designer, and you've received a surface model from a survey company, and that surface model was so huge that it absorbed all your system resources and didn't give you the resources, didn't allow you enough system left to do your job. I got to design a freeway through this thing, and it takes everything my computer's got just to put the surface model on the screen. That's not productive. So whoever delivered you that point cloud that you built a surface from that ate up your 64 gigs of RAM didn't do you a service. If they didn't bring it to you in a format that's usable, it has to be functional. So I think I'm going back to compression. If you can create data that works and has a small enough footprint, because we aren't the end product. We're the foundation. We're the cornerstone, but we're not the end product. We're just the first tool that a designer is going to take and go out and do something with it, and they need to have enough resources left to do something. So if we don't give it to them in a ingestible format that they can easily build into a surface model that they can work with, we haven't done them a service.
Yeah, I think like you could kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into the future here. I mean, my background prior to sort of moving into what we call reality capture was more on the manufacturing side, where they're quite a bit ahead of what we're doing here in most of like architecture, engineering, and construction. From like meshes have been around for a long, long time. This is not a new thing that we're seeing, and like that world is still using a combination of parametric CAD, where you can, rise Revit, what Revit is, right? It's the I and BIM, right? It's the things you can associate with it. So I think as like meshes become more intelligent, potentially that will matter. But the point you're making is about just the graphics capability of like trying to look at a gigantic mesh that does represent the real world. It is the more true version of what's there. But until you have graphics capabilities that can manage something of that size for a building, I think it's incredible steps have been made in that direction. But yeah, I don't think CAD's going anywhere anytime soon because of the other things you can do with the parametric nature of a model. But yeah, it is really fun to see how meshes have come along, and some of the new things you can do with segmentation, machine learning, and actually give a little bit more intelligence to that mesh. I do think we'll start to bring those two worlds a little closer together.
Do I think CAD's going to go away in the next year? Probably not, right? It can't. There's too many people that still use it, right? But that's where it's my job as a construction technologist is to make sure that I do have the hardware that I need to bring the newest and latest, greatest things out. And it's my job to talk to the owners, architects, and say, hey, look, you guys do realize this is a terabyte size file. Your little computer that you bought from HP, that you probably bought from Amazon, isn't going to support it. It needs a little bit more oomph and a little bit more power to it. So it's up to me to kind of help them and steer them into what direction they could possibly need, right? Whether it's Revit, AutoCAD, you can still work in Revit and give them a 2D AutoCAD plan.
So what are some of these ways we've augmented the deliverable? So we don't have the death of paper yet. We have it in the form of PDF for the most part. We have CAD files, we have 3D models. We're starting to have meshes. So as you approach projects, and a lot of these are bid awards, you're approaching it and being competitive against other providers. What are some ways that you're augmenting that and finding ways to deliver something that the client didn't necessarily ask for, but is winning you more work?
That's a good question.
The visualization tools, for starters, that are available to us today so far surpass anything I would have imagined 10 years ago, that you can fly through a project in a virtual point cloud that you can turn into a mesh so that it looks real. It allows us to put things on LinkedIn and show off, these amazing graphics in this amazing world that we're creating with this reality capture. But that's not; those are fluff. They're not product.
Hold on.
We provide those. Well, they can be product if that's what they're looking for. But and it may be that's what you can build a business case around creating those graphics for somebody, and now you've got that as a product that you offer. But most of us aren't in the business of creating graphics for gaming or the movie industry.
Or project pursuits. So before you start, I would like to say that we did apply survey control to the project that Logan was referring to in regards, and I love my surveyors, and they absolutely have their roles and responsibilities on projects. However, those coordinates were wrong, and so after weeks of futzing, we were like, just humor me. Call somebody else out. And when they returned the proper control points and we applied them, everything was good. So thank you for the clarification.
It's another, trial and error there. Make sure you're actually getting the right data points. In terms of pursuits, that's something our VDC team works pretty heavily on to try and win projects. We work with our business development directors from across the country, and one thing we've been able to implement recently is we'll go out and we'll scan an existing site and bring that into a program like Fuser, where we can do an animation, a fly-through of this point cloud, supplement that with the new builds or demolition sequences, tie it with the schedule, show it in 4D. So just having that technology and being able to provide those visualizations has been huge, not only in winning work, but in helping our project teams plan a project. Like we've gotten numerous times where we're working with a project team and we're going through the animation, they're like, oh, we didn't think through that. That's not gonna work. Like we always help them identify issues with their schedule, issues with the logistics plans. It's really helpful, just not only the shiny Hollywood BIM that we provide, but the actual function behind it.
So I guess calling it fluff was a little harsh.
Sorry, I can't hear down here.
I guess calling it fluff was a little bit harsh then.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many millions you need before you have to don't stop calling it fluff. But it's good. It was really cool, and it was a really cool project. And they were up against some really heavy hitters on this pursuit, and there was a lot of attention on the organization to get the win, right? And so, just as Logan said, to be able to show what could be inside of what was already existing, absolutely could not be accomplished without reality capture and what that brings to the table. So it was a really nice win, and it went very far in the org to, we always talk about the ROI and like reiterating the value of what we're doing, and big project wins like that, gets everybody's attention. So excellent job.
I think it is fair in saying it's fluff to a certain extent, right? It's just these flashy graphics that they help you win jobs, but there is function behind it. And once you can prove that function to business teams and to owners, that it's a game changer.
Yeah, we worked on a hangar out at our local airport in Grand Rapids. It was for a large grocery company, that's what I'll say. They had a hard time visualizing how vehicles would be able to pull in the garage. Like they were looking at it and they're like, it's not gonna work. We have to add on to the building. And we said, just hold on a minute, let us go out. They had actually, I think they may have poured the foundations. So we went out, kind of drew everything up and showed the vehicles kind of pulling in, parking to a spot, showed them that, hey, you guys have more than enough room to be able to back out and pull out. We're working on another project right now for our local Kent County, where we're from. And they want to see that. They want to be able to visually see all that I don't know, well, fluff isn't a good word, but just see all the pretty stuff, right? Because that's what sells, and that's what's going to help them create the funding for the project. But we went out, used our VLX, used our laser scanner, used our Matterport, used our drones. We've used every piece of technology we have to create this 4D visualization for them. So
I think our view on this is actually obviously coming from the sort of like quick and dirty photo capture view. Like if you don't have time to go scan a job, or you're constrained for time, we see our customers, in order to win work, do a one walk around the building, now maybe fly a drone to get that viewpoint as well. Very simple, very fast, quick and dirty, and visuals sell. We hear this very, very often from customers that are like, look, if I can come in there with your area and like this is your building, I can kind of help you see it, even if I don't get a chance to overlay a model or really get into it. It just connects your client to what you're doing pretty quickly.
I think one thing that's really interesting is as the models, as we prove more and more that our models that we create are accurate, and well, it just becomes the actual ground truth, right? So even the vectors that we might draft over them, right, go into some other deliverable because that's the way that process was. But we're starting to see use cases where the model is now just being delivered as is, and that's the ground truth. So in an Alta survey, there are certain features that used to have to be delivered in CAD, and now they're no longer requiring that. It's just in the model. And so you can always revert back to that ground truth or the model as the ground truth.
So one of the directions I was going, I was hoping I was doing a leading question a little bit, is we haven't even discussed AI and how that might augment a lot of these processes. I'm just going to drop, just a couple of things, and they're relevant from these past couple of weeks of looking at projects for myself. But a lot of times we get these requirements for jobs, and they're asking for, again, 3D models, CAD drawings, PDFs, reports, things like that. And a very basic example that we've seen here at this conference is, hey, the client wants to go through the building and catalog all the light switches and data outlets, right? So a traditional way would be to go out there and stand in every room and take pictures and then draw up a CAD file or a Revit file, et cetera. But can we augment that and say, we propose to go ahead and use AI and have it do the majority of the work for us, and it will catalog everything. That might be plan A, and hope that it works with a safety net of plan B if it doesn't, a price to do it the traditional way. And there's lots of these opportunities for us as technology specialists to evangelize and push this forward and offer these opportunities as a plan A, as opposed to that plan B. So I guess at this point, wanted to open it up for questions and see if anybody had any questions for the panel regarding data and deliverables, or some other great failures, or if anybody wants to offer up any of their stories as well. And I will attempt to see here if I can see anybody and if there are any questions, and give the opportunity. Put everybody else on the spot. Anybody else want to share a terrible story?
I might throw something in there just because obviously we're an AI company and you just mentioned that, but one of the things that is becoming more of an important topic around what we do is just the traceability of the decision that was made, right? It's impossible to put a data set through a neural network and understand why it made that decision, right? There's too many pathways that it goes through. But we can at least document the decision or the classification of the points, right? ASPRS has standards around that, 1.4 LAS standards. But if there was a misclassification, like you classified a point as a tree and it should have been a car, right? You need to recognize that, but you also need to trace and have that be part of the metadata on that decision. Because later on, if there is something that was built incorrectly, right? You want to be able to come back to that point where those decisions were made. And that's the biggest thing with AI right now, is sometimes it's too big of a black box, but we can create traceability afterwards to the decisions that were made.
All right, we have a taker.
I was just wondering, what are some of the main strategies you guys are using to get your clients to utilize 3D models versus the standard PDFs that they've been used to for so long?
So I got a pretty good story for you. Obviously, as a general contractor, we build vertical buildings, right? So we've got anything from nursing homes, hospitals, storage facilities. We have one project where we did not use BIM. It cost us $30,000. I went up to the project manager and I said, I could have saved you $15,000. I said, if we would have just took the time, modeled everything out, coordinated it, we would have been ahead, because we would have put that in the bid to the owner. Hey, we need a little extra to help coordinate the process. It would have got them in on time instead of behind schedule. So, granted, there's 3D modeling right there that could help save companies money by just taking the extra time. Yeah, it's going to cost a little bit, but would you rather have it up front, or would you rather have it on the back end and try to have to explain to the owner, hey, I just cost you $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 because we didn't take the time and model it up the way that we should have.
I think owners are becoming increasingly more accepting of implementing 3D on their projects. We do all of our MAPF coordination utilizing 3D models. I honestly don't know how we would do it in 2D. We get design models and design drawings that the ducts and piping and nothing's been properly coordinated, so it helps us save a lot of money and time on rework in the schedule. We can kind of prove to an owner, like, we caught 10,000 clashes on this one floor, and the coordination meetings that we went through to work through those issues and solve those problems before construction even begins, or at the beginning of construction, we're able to prove a pretty valuable use case of utilizing 3D to them.
I'm going to have a really, really hard time selling somebody 3D who's doing, carpet paint and finish takeoff. So, if they want it in 2D, what about Bluebeam? Bluebeam is so big and such a threat to Autodesk that as a reseller, you literally have to split teams that aren't technically supposed to talk to each other. So I don't think PDFs are going anywhere. I think they all have their place. I think models have their place. I think metadata has its place. I think meshes have their place. I think they all have their place in the ecosystem, right? So
I was going to say, what is this 2D that you speak of? Because I haven't run into anybody in so long that isn't using 3D modeling of some kind or another, that I'm having a hard time believing that there's actually people still out there that aren't. Who's using 2D that we need to know about, that we need to educate them?
A lot of builders that we know are using 2D. Honestly, it's actually, if you think about it, a map is a very intuitive thing, right? You get into Google Earth and Google Maps, they don't throw you into a 3D environment. It's easier to sort of at least conceptually start at that level. And in some cases for us, just delivering something that looks like a colored map is much easier for like a builder to understand, depending on what you're trying to tell them. It's not for everything, but we're always trying to meet the industry where it's at. And 2D is still very powerful, I think, for a lot of things.
Yeah, as the end product that goes on paper that somebody looks at. But that product was built from a 3D model in most cases. So we're still using 3D, even though, so when you talk about working in 2D, we don't work in 2D. We may produce an end product that gets printed, but that's as far as I go into the 2D world.
We had an interesting dynamic with the 3D, 2D. What did the client ultimately want to do? Big abandoned warehouse was a sugar beet factory, and we scanned it. They wanted to go ahead and get an understanding of what is the demolition of this facility, and all they cared about was two-dimensional floor plans. And I'm sitting there being like, why do you just care about 2D floor plans? Like you're gonna get so much more with this bid, and in a three-dimensional world, getting an understanding of how to do, demo this building appropriately. Let's just run a Revit model with it, just even a shell model at that, and then your architect can build. And they fought me and fought me and fought me, and I just gave up on the fight with it. Ironically, 2 months later, yeah, we want that 3D Revit model, and it's I just find I find it interesting. You can give them as much pushback as you want to, but at the end of the day, they're going to make their own decisions and lay in that bed. So,
you know, most of the sensors we see here today are obviously collecting in 3D, but it's the processes afterwards that still demand it in 2D. And you know, for our company, we've actually had to, because our companies have adopted these sensors, and but they still want a 2D deliverable. We have to find a way to actually rasterize a 3D point cloud just to run our extraction algorithms off it. So you start with 3D, but you're bringing it back to 2D just because there's an existing process that you just still have to live in.
Just because they don't want to work intelligently doesn't mean that we don't want to work intelligently, right? So I utilize all that 3D information. Then I just dumb it down to give it back to them so they digest it.
So for us, we get the architectural files, and it's in 2D. We have to create the 3D. So for us, it's backwards, where a lot of the architects still work in 2D, right? Because they don't want to, because let's face it, Autodesk corners the market in, you know, architectural software creation, right? Like they've got everybody, excuse the term, but you know, they've got you.
They're the market leader.
What's that?
They're the market leader.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just, you know, and it's a lot of these architectural firms, they can't spend the time and the money to get everybody trained up and buy new software because it's so expensive, and Autodesk is not helping.
So I think there's a common theme to a lot of these answers about how do you replace that PDF that the client or customer is asking for. And my term is usually the easy wins, right? There's that good old Staples easy button. That's what I want, right? If you can present a solution that is easier for the customer that's paying for that application, I almost guarantee every time it'll win. And we have a lot of solutions that are great and they provide lots of data, but if they're not easy, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to fly. So if you can present something that's easier, that's kind of where I go to a plan A versus plan B. Propose doing it as a solution that's easier, provide it with a backup that you can provide that deliverable.